Oh, look, a salty Notre Dame fan. You're just mad Brian Kelly left. Notre Dame is a poverty program. Prior to the 2022 season, Notre Dame and LSU fans did nothing but feud on Twitter when head coach Brian Kelly left for the Bayou. 3 years later, looks like Notre Dame fans may have been right. Ryan Roberts, A to Z Sports, breaking everything down, Notre Dame football and across the wonderful world of college football. Folks, not going to lie, going to be a little bit salty here for a second. If you want to call it that, or call it any other word, it's totally fine, because I have, for the longest time, and it seemed like for the longest time of my Notre Dame fandom, I was what you would call a Brian Kelly apologist. For several years after he was hired, I told myself, this is the guy. Look what he did at Central Michigan. Look what he did at Cincinnati. You can even go back to Grand Valley State. This is the guy that's finally going to get Notre Dame back to the mountaintop, something that they haven't done since 1988, win a national championship. And for Notre Dame fans that were a part of this fandom during this time, during the Brian Kelly tenure, we have adopted something that we call in Notre Dame land as BK PTSD. And what this means is, quite simply, we appreciate what Coach Kelly did in terms of raising the floor of the program. When he got there, post Charlie Weiss era, it was not in the best situation. You had to raise the expectations and the standards. He did that from a floor perspective. But countlessly, time after time, we saw this program fall short in the biggest games when it mattered most. Coach Kelly won the games that he was supposed to, but never was able to get Notre Dame over the hump. And from the outside perspective, most fans thought it was a Notre Dame problem. It's a recruiting problem. You can't get big time talent up to South Bend, Indiana. It's too cold. Nobody wants to go to class. Well, a couple years removed, we have seen this roster develop a longer, more athletic, explosive roster that was once told to us that we cannot have. And I'm sitting here and I remember these conversations when Coach Kelly first went to LSU. It was the same thought process and narrative that was out there. He's going to be better leaving Notre Dame because there's a cap on how good Notre Dame could be. At LSU, you can do anything. Look what Ed Orgeron did there. Look what some of these coaches who, Les Miles, these coaches that won national championships despite having very flawed coaching styles and very flawed parts of their tenure. Brian Kelly can surely win at LSU. And at the time, this was the conversation. Guys, be careful. Be careful, because there is a general laziness around Brian Kelly and what he did at Notre Dame. There is, and it's a running joke. And if you don't believe it, I once had Tom Lemming, who's a pioneer of the recruiting industry, come in, and I talked to him simply and asked about the Notre Dame recruiting and how everything is moving forward. And he took a shot at Brian Kelly. No, and I didn't even lead into it. And he said, quote unquote, Brian Kelly was great in the room, closing recruits. But the problem is you can never get him in the room. Why? Because he was too busy golfing, too busy doing whatever he felt like doing. The effort was never there on the recruiting trail. And all Notre Dame fans were met with was constant coach speak of how they need to coach better. But changes never ensued. There was a string of feeling fine about winning 10 football games. And at the University of Notre Dame, just winning 10 football games is not enough. And it wasn't enough. And it got tired. And now 3 years into the LSU tenure of Brian Kelly, I sit here and say, he's doing exactly at LSU what he did at Notre Dame. LSU fans in my mentions a couple days ago, and I didn't even want to make this video at first, but I have LSU fans in my mentions talking about, oh man, we could still go 9-3. We could still go 9-3, win a bowl game, 10-win season, propel us in the future. You know when the best year is for Brian Kelly and a Brian Kelly coach team? It's the next year. It's not the current year, because that means that we can push the standard into the future and we don't have to take accountability for the failures in the present. That is a Brian Kelly-led program. And I feel bad for, because I remember having these conversations when he took over for LSU. And I had these conversations of, guys, just be careful. He'll raise your floor, but I'm not sure he'll ever get to that ceiling. And now, year 3 of regression under Brian Kelly. Started out pretty good in 2022. You had the victory over Alabama. But since then, we have seen this same coach who had failures time and time again in top 25 opponents in the biggest games is now 4-8 against top 25 teams. A team that in year 3, when there should be no more excuses, you've had multiple recruiting classes. The transfer portal is a thing. The NIL landscape is a thing. And despite that, there is nothing but excuses. I have no idea how good head coach Marcus Freeman is going to be at Notre Dame. I have no idea if he's ever going to win a national championship. No idea. But you know what I'm sure of, no matter how long he's here, is whether it goes great or it goes poorly, there's going to be accountability. And I can root for him. Brian Kelly was a person that was not a fun person to root for. He was a rude person that countlessly did nothing but insult integrity and be a guy that was unapproachable. He was just not a fun person to root for, and he continuously fell short in the biggest moments. So LSU fans, whenever this Brian Kelly saga finally ends and the Brian Kelly era comes to an end, I hope that we can rebuild that relationship, because there was no hard feelings, just a uneducated opinion over what Brian Kelly brings to the table. Folks, I'm glad we can finally put this behind us. I'm glad that a lot of LSU fans are finally seeing Brian Kelly for what he truly was. And you know the drill as we continue forward here. As always, go Irish.